This is lesson 2.4 from the Ratios, Rates, and Statistics book. In Mrs. Walker's class, this is on page 111. Lesson 2.4 is titled Rate Problem Solving. Rate problem solving. All right, so we've got our warm up. And the instructions are for the first three are find each unit rate. Remember the difference between a rate and a unit rate. All right, so the first one is 40 miles per 5 minutes. The second one is 64 miles per 3 gallons. And the third one, let's get that in there correctly. And the third one, if I can fit it in there, is $4.40 per 4 hot dogs. Okay, so that's your warm-up problems. Let's get our I can statement on here. Here's what we'll be learning in this lesson. I can solve problems using equivalent rates and unit rates. All right. That's what we'll be learning. Solving problems using equivalent rates and unit rates. Learning what the difference is there. All right. Okay, so notes area. We have just one to glue in, and we'll put it in the usual upper left side. So, gotta get my glue going here. There we go. Tiny, tiny little smears. Tiny tadpoles, as we call them. And a quick press is all it takes. And then, yellow highlighter. Solving problems involving rates. All right. Here's our steps. The first step, well, there's two different ways we're doing it, all right? But there's two different methods, okay? One is using equivalent fractions, and one is using unit rates. And we'll talk about when it's best to use one method or the other. So the first one is step one, write two rates with an equal sign between them. That's kind of like what was happening up here. Okay, you got a rate, an equal sign, and another rate. Okay, that's your step one. All right, and then step two is to identify what you need to multiply the numerator or denominator of the complete rate by to write an equivalent fraction on the other side of the equal sign. So that's a whole lot of words that basically means what you already know. What do you need to multiply by to get one rate to the next rate, one fraction to the next fraction? And you know that what you do to the bottom you have to do to the top, or what you do to the top you have to do to the bottom. So what is that number that's going to make that equivalent fraction? And then I put in here with our brown pencil step 3, which they, I guess, just assume we know. But once you've figured out what that multiplier is, then you've got to do the math. All right. Now, when you're doing unit rates, it's a little bit different. Your first step is to find the unit rate for the known rate. So again, that's what you did here. You had a rate, and then you had to find the unit rate, remembering that a unit rate has a 1 in the denominator with whatever its unit is. So for the unit rate method, you're going to find the unit rate first for whatever rate that you've been given. And then using that unit rate, you'll multiply the unit rate by the known quantity. So then you'll build up from there based on what the problem is asking you to find. All right, so that's a lot of words, but when you see it in your examples that we do here in the notes, I think it'll be pretty clear. Okay, so the first one is complete each equivalent rate. Complete each equivalent rate. That's our first example. All right, so we're going to do 2 examples of this. A is 12 words per 1 minute. Now, step 1 tells us to write 2 rates with an equal sign between them. So we've got 12 words per minute equals how many words per 5 minutes? All right, how many words per 5 minutes? So that's step 1, setting up the 2 rates. All right, now step 2 is figuring out, okay, what's going to be our multiplier? Well, we can't tell from here because we're missing information, but we have complete information in the denominator, so that's where we'll work from. So what do I have to do to get 1 to a 5? Well, I have to multiply it by 5. And what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I'll multiply this times 5. And now I do the math, and the math tells me, where'd my brown pencil go? Oh, there, hiding back there. All right, math tells me that I have to multiply 12 times 5, and 12 times 5 is 60. So now we have 60 words. Remember how important labels are, the unit labels, whenever you're dealing with rates. So 12 words per 1 minute is equal to 60 words per 5 minutes. All right, that's completing it using the equivalent rate. It's the same thing as writing equivalent fractions. All right, so let's do one more. B. So $4 per 3 liters of something equals 18 liters, some dollar amount for 18 liters. All right, now that's our step 1, setting up the 2 rates with an equal sign between them. Our step 2 is figuring out what the multiplier is going to be. Well, 3 times 6 gets me 18. So what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 4 times 6 gets me, do the math part, 24. This is $4, so $24. So $4 per 3 liters is equal to $24 per 18 liters. Okay? All right, so that's the first one. That's just using equivalent fractions to find your unit equivalents. All right? Okay, now let's figure out how we do that using unit rates, and then we'll talk about why we would do one method as opposed to the other. All right, so solve using unit rates. Now we're going to solve using unit rates. Okay. All right, solve using unit rates. Let's see. So we've got this problem here. Let's keep that in there. There we go. Carter paid $3 for 20 copies. All right. What is the cost? What is the cost to make 50 copies? All right. Okay, so let's remember that our first step when we are using the unit rate method is to find the unit rate for the known rate. All right. Well, what's the known rate? The known rate is $3 for 20 copies. So that's where we're going to start. So $3 for 20 copies. And that's setting up our step 1. All right, and then that's going to be equal to, well, we want to find out what 50 copies is, okay? Well, we're going to first find the unit rate of this, and because that's how we do it in this method. And I'll tell you why in a minute, but just hang with me, all right? First, we're going to find the unit rate of this, okay? Multiply the unit rate by the known quantity is what will happen next. This is still kind of part of step 1. Okay, we're finding the unit rate. So 1 copy. So what do we have to do to get 20 copies to 1 copy? We divide by 20. And what we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So now we do the math, and $3 divided by 20 is 15 cents. So that's the unit rate. Each copy costs 15 cents. But we want to know what would it cost to make 50 copies. So now we're going to build that up to what we want to know. All right, so 50 copies. And again, what do we have to do to get that 1 up to a 50? Well, we multiply by 50. And what we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. And 15 hundredths, or 15 cents in this case, multiplied by 50 is $7.50. All right, so that's how you figure it out using unit rates. You take the rate that they give you in the problem, you figure out what its unit rate is, and then you build it up to what they want you to find out. In this case, how many for 50 copies. Now, here's why we would do it this way rather than the equivalent method. Because if I had gone straight from $3 for 20 copies equals how much money for 50 copies, you would have to try and figure out, what do I have to multiply 20 times to get to 50? Well, when you're dealing with these kind of numbers here, it's easy to see what I have to multiply 3 times to get 18, or 1 time to get 5. But when I'm working with numbers here, if they're asking me, it's not easy to figure out, what do I have to multiply 20 times to get to 50? So, so that's when it's easier to break it down to its unit rate and then build it back up. I hope that makes sense. All right, so let's see. I'm going to put a little note down here to try and explain into your notes what I just said. So you use this method when multiplier isn't even. In other words, there isn't an even number that I could multiply this by to get to this. Okay, that's when we use the unit rate method. All right, okay, so that's your notes for lesson 2.4. Let's take a look at our practice problems. All right, here's the practice problems for lesson 2.4. I seem to have a glare on here. Oh, that's right. My erasable pen ran out of ink, and so I used a regular pencil. And now I remember why I didn't do it, because it glares badly. So anyway, I hope you'll be able to see it. All right, so the first two problems are completing each equivalent rate. So just fill in the missing amount. And then problem number 3 is Nigel paid $3.60 for 30 copies of his flyer. Use a unit rate to find the cost to make 80 copies. Remember that the unit rate method that we used in the second example of our notes. Multiplying evenly from 30 to 80 is not going to be easy to do. Better to make a unit rate out of this first rate and then build up to 80. All right, and then the last problem, if I can get it out of the glare. Tom buys some apples at a fruit stand. They cost $3 for every 2 pounds. Find the price Tom pays for 12 pounds. And you may use whichever method seems appropriate, the equivalent rate or the unit rate. You look at those numbers and decide which one do you think is going to be the best. Okay, so let's look at how these are done. Okay, so complete each equivalent rate. Well, I need to first figure out how do I get 1 gallon to 6 gallons. And of course, that is multiply it by 6. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 24 times 6 is 144. Right? So 24 miles to the gallon is equal to 144 miles to per 6 gallons. All right, so same thing here. What do I have to do? 4 times what is 32? Well, 4 times 8 is 32. So what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 6 times 8 is 48, so that's $48. So $6 per 4 liters is equal to $48 for 32 liters. All right, number 3. Nigel paid $3.60 for 30 copies of his flyers. Use a unit rate, it says, to find the cost to make 80 copies. And that makes sense because I'm going to have to multiply up from 30 to 80. That's not an even multiplier. So better to break this 30 down into a unit rate and then build that unit rate up to 80. So this is how that looks. So my first rate that I have, they've given me $3.60 for 30 copies. Now I need to figure out, well, what is the unit rate for that, or 1 copy? Well, I had to divide this by 30 to get to 1 copy. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So $3.60 divided by 30 is 12 cents. So 0.12, 12 cents. Now that I have this unit rate, I can build that up to the 80 copies I want to know. How much will 80 copies, how much will 80 copies cost? Well, I know what 1 copy costs, so it's pretty easy then for me to figure out what 80 will cost, because I just multiply this by 80. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. And 12 cents times 80 is $9.60. Hope that's what you got too. All right, last one. Tom buys some apples at a fruit stand. They cost $3 for every 2 pounds. Find the price Tom pays for 12 pounds. Now, you could do this by breaking this $3 for 2 pounds down to a unit price and then building that up to 12 pounds. But I can see that 2 times 6 is going to be 12, and that makes it very easy to do an equivalent rate instead. So that's how I'm going to set it up. Either way is fine. There's just an extra step in the unit rate method that you don't need for this problem because of the even multiplier from 2 to 12. So $3 for 2 pounds equals how many dollars for 12 pounds? All right, well, I know to get from 2 to 12, I have to multiply that by 6, and what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top, and 3 times 6 is 18, so that's $18 for 12 pounds. All right, okay, so that's how we do those practice problems. Let's take a look at your worksheet. So your worksheet for lesson 2.4, the first problems 1 through 6 are just like the simple equivalent ones that we did in the first example of your notes. Problem 7 it's asking you which rate is not equivalent to this. There's a typo in this. Which rate is not equivalent to 500 miles per 10 hours would suggest that there's only one that is not equivalent. There are 2 that are not equivalent because there's a typo in this. So find 2 that are not equal to this. Okay, there are 2. Yes, sometimes these worksheets have some typos on them, and we try to remember where they're at so we can show you. All right, so then down here, 8, 9, 10, and 11 are basic word problems just like the ones we did in the notes or the practice problems. I believe if you look at these, the only one that you have to use the unit rate for is this one. Can you tell why? 12 oranges to 16 oranges, not an even multiplier on that. All right, so keep an eye out for that. And then that brings us to your exit ticket for lesson 2.4. This is just extra practice. See if you feel comfortable doing these. You feel like you know exactly how to do them. I don't tell you how to do them or give you the answers. Your instructor might use them as assessments. Okay, so that is lesson 2.4 out of the Ratios, Rates, and Statistics book. Remember, the only way to learn math is to do math, and mistakes are proof that you're learning.